If ever your life could be a true crime podcast episode, then this podcast is for you. We're about to embark on a roller coaster of emotions, insights, survival, and stories about escape. So buckle up and let the journey begin.
Hey everybody, welcome into the Escape Pod. I'm Julie.
I'm Charity.
And you want to introduce our very special guest?
Yes, it's the first time we have had the mayor of Rapid City in our podcast studio. Hi, Jason.
Hello, Charity and Julie.
Jason
Thanks for having me.
For those of you who don't know, Jason and I go way back. Served on the city council together.
We did.
Ooh,
I
how far back?
escaped politics, and he decided to keep going, and here we are now in the mayor's seat.
Yeah, we were, my first year on the council was 2016,
Yeah.
which was Charity's final year. So we overlapped there.
2017 was my final year.
Yeah, I came on 27. So that was like the 1 year.
Overlapped.
Oh, gotcha.
One year overlap when she left in 2017. Which is good. You know, kind of interesting because you hear stories about the previous councils and administrations, things I didn't know Charity would share that stuff as the newbie on the block, which is kind of funny now because we're in 2025.
I know.
It doesn't seem like that long ago, does it?
It does and it doesn't. It's weird.
Yeah.
So much of life has changed.
Yeah.
The world's very different since then. Even public service is very different. I can just tell you just how it has evolved is very different post-COVID versus pre-COVID.
Yeah, I would guess so. Well, listen, we're going to start the way we always start our regular podcast episodes, which is to talk about something we're escaping from. So I will just go first. Speaking of politics, the text message ads from politicians or candidates. I'm like, stop it. Stop. Today, I think I got one. I think he's in Northeast South Dakota. I'm like, why am I even getting this?
Uh-oh.
Anyway.
You got on the wrong list, lady.
I'm on the wrong list. That's just me.
I do not like the text message deal. In fact, when I ran for mayor, it was suggested that I do that. I said, I'm not doing text messages. I find them annoying, and I just don't want people to find me overly annoying. I know they reach more people, but there's got to be a better way, you know.
But it's also kind of invasive, too, I think.
I think so,
personally.
too.
You know what I mean? Like, listen, this is my personal device. I am paying for this service. Like, you don't get to just send me whatever.
I think that's fair.
That's why I still always ask somebody, like, if they want to reach out and I have that person's contact, I ask the person first, do you mind if I share your cell phone number with so-and-so? I don't just...
Thank you for doing that. Yeah. I've had people share my cell phone's my personal cell phone, and random people get the number, and that's fine. But some people call it interesting times for interesting reasons, and I'm like, well, I always appreciate the friends who are like, hey, so-and-so wants your number. Is that all right? Sure.
Yeah.
You know, it depends on what the topic is and if I know them.
Yeah.
But,
yeah, for sure.
I mean, because it's like, well, we had a couple of months ago, Holly Strand in the studio talking about, you know, how devices have become weaponized to prey on our children, right? And she was talking about how you wouldn't just allow random strangers into your kids' bedroom, but with the device and you know, your number just starts to spread. We're doing it to us too. I mean, so really creepy.
What are you escaping today?
Rabbits.
We have on campus?
No, the ones on campus are fun. No, so other morning, I'm getting ready to go to work, open my garage, put my stuff in my car, and this rabbit hops into the garage. And I'm like, oh, no, you can't stay in here all day. We have to do something about this. So all my mother-in-law stuff, we have a mother-in-law, the Mother-in-Law Chronicles here now that we have moved her here, and all that Christmas stuff stored in my third stall. So it goes straight for that. And I'm like, I'm not going to get it. It's going to destroy something, you know. So I open up the third stall and I'm trying to flush it out, and we played ping pong for minutes. You know, I'm in heels and a dress, and I'm just like, I'm going to win against this rabbit. I did eventually win, but I was like, come on. You don't want to be in here. There's nothing in here for you. You're going to be dark and alone all day. Let's get out. So we finally got it out. But
my kids thought the rabbits were super fun at the house until they had a garden. And then the rabbit was eating the things they had planted. And then it's not as much fun to have.
The ones here aren't scared of anything. So I'm leaving work yesterday, and there's a little bare earth patch by Complete Health, by that sidewalk. And it's just laying there all spread out, belly on the dirt. And I go walking by, it just turns its head, and I'm like, okay, peace. Not going to run. Like, okay.
He's calling one heart home, too.
Yeah.
Mayor Salamun, anything you're escaping from for this next, 45 minutes or so?
Well, yeah, I wouldn't be doing it at this time, but I'm escaping from projects at home I need to get done.
There you
which
go.
are probably going to wait for me this weekend. Gwenny bought a new mirror, and she's getting rid of a medicine cabinet and light fixture stuff. And
Nice.
And we have constant
Spring projects,
issues.
yeah.
I'm also running from, getting my truck serviced.
Yes.
My left turn signal is out of whack. It still works, but it's doing like a fast signal.
yeah,
And I kept telling my wife I'm out of blinker fluid just to see if she'd pick up on it. No, there's no such thing as blinker
Yes,
fluid.
this is stand-up hour with Mayor Salamun.
Half-hour comedy hour with your local
always
leaders.
stuff like that. Real life stuff,
Yes, real life stuff.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah, it piles on.
Right. So we do quite a bit here on the Escape Pod talk about true crime, but also trauma, and often people who have successfully escaped the good, the bad, and the ugly of life. So you have shared on occasion a lot about your own personal life and your childhood, and I would argue you're a pretty good escape artist at having overcome quite a bit. Do you want to just talk a little bit about your life pre-Rapid City, how you ended up in Rapid City, and go from there?
Yeah, I haven't until the last several years, I haven't really talked too much about it. I think maybe when Charity and I first met, we probably swapped stories from growing up. But, our life story is still being written. So I always say that first. I think it's important to say I'm not defined, nor is anybody else really defined by the circumstances at their worst moments, whether it's your childhood or later in life. Maybe you're going through a tough time now. We're always either going into a storm, in a storm, coming out of one. So I recognize that, even though I have a story, a lot of people have a story. And the reason I share my story with people is it usually surprises people, and it's a way of connecting.
Yeah.
And I think when I talk about it, I think that helps. It's a way of connecting. And also just, for me, my faith is integrated into this story, and usually I have the opportunity to share why that matters so much and how I got here. So Rapid City is my hometown. A lot of folks may have heard I moved here in the late 80s at 11 years old permanently. Prior to that, I was born to two teenage parents in West Texas. They got pregnant. They decided to get married because they got pregnant. And I was born Christmas Eve of 77. And a couple years later, about 2.5 years later, had another brother.
Okay.
Have a brother. So my folks split when I was pretty young. I think before I could say kindergarten, they were split. And I have some faint memories of that time. But my dad ended up relocating to Colorado and eventually South Dakota. My mother had custody. That's just kind of by default. Your mother gets custody of you. She actually, and this is tough. I also want to say this. I'm going to share some things about family members that they also are not bound by their mistakes of the past, and there's also a lot of healing in things that are a part of this. But you have to tell the truth about the things that happen. My dad went to work one day, and while he was gone, one of my earliest memories, my mother had us pack up stuff, and we left on a bus. It felt like forever, like on the bus, but I think it was just a few cities over. So she left my dad for someone else, left him a letter, which I later on found and saw the Dear John letter, so to speak. Really heartbreaking with the wedding ring and that whole thing. And so my dad went to work one day and came home, and his family's gone.
Yeah.
And he had told me the story that outside he had kind of a couple of pieces of wood, and he carved both my brother and myself's names into these two separate pieces of wood that have ended up becoming a placard I hang in my home office that says Jason. And he gave it to me many years ago, and I was like, "Oh, this is cool, Dad. Thank you." He goes, "Well, there's a story behind this. I actually carved this and placarded it and everything else through tears and heartbreak. And so I have that as kind of like that reminder. But my dad, obviously, both my parents were struggling, young people, still trying to figure life out. So eventually he moved, like I said, he moved to Colorado. We stayed in West Texas. And basically I changed elementary schools a dozen times. My mom was an addict, deep into addiction, bartender. So she bartended till 2 a.m, got home usually 2:30 to 3. So I had to get me and my brother to whatever school we'd walk to, take care of everything that we had. We did not have much. I mean, at times I remember living in a crack house, lived in a lot of trailer houses and trailer parks. Depending on who she was married to or living with, the situation would change. An apartment here or there. Slept in cars. So we've been homeless at times. Couple of situations on drunken nights. We get taken away for a weekend, put in some, temporary orphanage type facility, very sterile environments. Through all of that, in West Texas, in Lubbock, Texas specifically, my mama and papa, who are my grandparents, were really my shining light, as well as my Uncle Eddie and his wife Sherry. So what happens is, they're never around, but they know the kids are in trouble. And so my mama and papa became my lifeline. So when I got to spend the night with them on like a Friday night and have to go back on a Sunday, I thought it was a Disneyland. I mean, we'd have Neapolitan ice cream. They'd always have that for me. They had a set of toys. My papa used to drive over-the-road trucks for a living, but he retired and worked for an amusement company collecting the quarters out of video games. So they had a tabletop Miss Pac-Man machine. They just lived in an apartment, but I thought this was like the best
awesome.
thing. Oh, yeah. Incredible.
It's like the only video game I can play.
Oh, and I wreck that game. Every time I go to press start, I beat that high score every time with a 1/4. It's like a personal mission of mine.
I love it.
But I'd sit there. My mama would play. They were heavy smokers, but they loved you. And if they had a drink, they called it poo-poo juice, so I would never want it. And we'd watch professional wrestling. So I still watch professional wrestling.
I was wondering where that was coming in. Yeah.
All the way back to I'm very honest about that.
Yeah.
People mock that. But I don't really care. But it goes way back. They would tell me stories about wrestling events they would see from like the 60s and 70s. And then in the 80s, early 90s, when I visit them in the early 90s, they'd still be watching wrestling. So anyways, my papa would read Louis L'Amour books with a cigarette hanging out of his mouth. The ashes would get long, burn a hole in his Western shirt. My mama would get mad at him. But, when you're a child, these are memories. And what I remember about this, I felt safe and loved. And, they lived in a small apartment too. Sure, they were rough around the edges. Now that I think about, a lot of the bad words and stuff I learned probably from my mama. But they were awesome. And they were a real light. For me. And so when I think back about my childhood, you could think about all these bad things, but I think about, wow, I had these oasis times. And that's because they're family. When my Uncle Eddie got a little older, that was their son, he would take me to go see to the movies. So I remember going to Karate Kid and Gremlins and Top Gun and all those kind of things. Because he was the cool guy, which is kind of funny now because he's a grandpa himself now, but he was cool to me. He listened to Def Leppard, and my mom and papa listened to George Strait, so I like both. So I can see these influences of things that I like today, all wrapped up in that. But my mother, the addiction, obviously, and I know this a lot more now, but even then, you go one of two ways when you are around that. You either follow that same road because that's the example that's set before you and it's very tempting and you're around it, or you grow a disdain. And I don't know what percentage that is. I can't stand drugs. It's robbed me. It's robbed people that I love. My mother was one way when she was sober and normal, a different way when she was high or drunk, and got into harder stuff, and then more desperate for money, and then and ended up in prison herself for lengthy periods of time. There's a lot there, so that was kind of the long and short of it. And my mama and papa tried to get her help. and she'd have times where she was okay, and then other times it was tough. So I don't know if I have to stop the whole story now, but I would just say, so before I came to Rapid City, I wanted a family like the ones I saw on television. So because I was home alone, taking care of my brother, which meant, and he was, he loved to get out and cause trouble and pick fights, and I'd have to go get in fights to protect my little brother. And so there was, and not like bloody fights, just like, hey, get off my brother,
Yeah.
And I'd be like, what did you do? And it's usually his fault, but I loved him. I was his kind of his guardian. I was his big brother. I had to take care of, and we had to look out for each other. And but we would watch, sitcoms on 80s sitcoms and stuff like that. And I always I want a family like that. And eventually, though, my mother continued to spiral, and my mama and papa, who loved me to death, like I was the apple in their eye, but they knew we couldn't stay in that situation. So they were calling Child Protective Services on my own mother. Wow. They were trying to get us to go move with my dad, who had since remarried and moved to South Dakota and really building his life here. And I didn't know him very well. There had been a couple of times when she was in prison, we'd have stints of like seeing him and stuff like that. So I had times. In fact, my first
more like visitation.
A little bit, yeah. So there's a few months in second grade that we moved to Colorado because she got in trouble, and I remember staying with them. He had just gotten married, so I met who my mom is now, which a big part of this story is down the road to my parents, but then we had to go back. We had to go back to Texas, so it was tough. And then in third grade, she went to prison, and for a good chunk of time. So I spent a few months here in Rapid City. My first time coming to Rapid City was actually when I was 8 years old. It wasn't home yet, but it was a very strange place, and we lived with my grandmother here. Oh. They had a pretty nice, to me, a mansion. And we all stayed there because they just relocated here. Okay. And we stayed there for a while. And then basically my mother got out of prison. We had to go back to her. And so those were a couple of temporary moments. But at age 11 is when it became permanent. Okay. And so my mama and papa really arranged for that. We had a lot of conversations. And there's kind of a point that made that happen. So there was she got, like I said, I hated the drugs. And so I'd see it around the house. And so one day I decided while she was sleeping, I was going to flush them down the toilet. And she was very angry when she woke up and they were gone. And for all I know, she was dealing or using for both or something like that. But I just remember seeing it, and I said, I'm going to flush this down the toilet. So I got in big trouble. And through all that series of events, I'm getting older. I'm in fifth grade now, and I'm starting to say, this is not right. And I talked to my mama and papa on the phone. Their phone number was my lifeline. I still remember it to this day. They came and got me. We talked, and they're like, we got to get you to your daddy. That's what they say. We got to get you to your daddy. And that was sad to me because I'd have to leave them, but I knew it was the right thing. And so long story short there, I came up here, but at the last minute, my mother did kind of the guilt trip thing. You're going to leave me. You're abandoning me. My brother stayed at that last minute, could not stand losing. And he's younger, so he's a lot more easy to...
vulnerable.
Yeah. And they were closer than I'd say my mother and I were. He was closer to her. I mean, and he was younger, but I knew we had to go, and so we went our separate ways. And so that was the hardest thing for me when I came up here. Wasn't all the things I experienced as a kid. It was leaving my brother. That for me was really hard. And he's in prison today in Texas, and he doesn't mind me talking about his story, but he ended up in the world of drugs in a big way, and he's spent most of his life behind bars in some form or fashion. He's in today for dealing methamphetamine.
You think it would have been different had he come with you? Or do you
Well,
think the seeds where he planted?
A couple of times he
or-
came up here. Cody, who has the heart of gold, like I love him to pieces. And we talk on the phone every once in a while when I have family dinner at my parents' house, and he'll call, from prison, and he's doing so great with his treatment and everything else. But
Good.
he always had a knack for finding trouble as a kid. So even when he came up here, you kind of like
Glint in his eye.
a little bit of like he had a kind of restless spirit
Yeah.
thing about him. But I think he'd have done well if he had a mom and a dad at home and structure and and channeled all that into a positive direction. But when you don't have those guardrails, I learned this as a dad. My kids are fully grown now. My job, especially their teenage years, I put up guardrails, and like my son would crash up against those guardrails. He's doing awesome today, but had I not been there with those guardrails, he'd be in a ditch. You needed that, and he didn't have that.
Right.
He had to kind of fend for himself, and real tough exterior. Like he's just a big, jacked up dude, and tattoos all over his body and stuff. But he actually has a heart of gold. I think with a normal environment, I think he would have done much better. It's not 100% guarantee that our kids won't go off the rails,
Right.
but it helped. I mean, all the data would tell you that that's a better indicator. Doesn't mean that you could be a great parent and your kids still struggle. That happens. So I never want a good parent whose kids are struggling to feel like they're a bad parent. But just odds are that they're going to have a better chance. And if nothing else, you're planting seeds today that maybe it's in 25, 30 years until they get it, but they will get it
Right.
because of what you're doing for them. But I do think he would have done much well. You can't get much worse than where he's at right now.
Will he?
Yeah, will he get out?
Yeah.
It's a constant thing. There have been times over the years he's wanted me to write a letter for him, and usually I don't do it because I think he's where he needs to be. This is the tough love thing. We think that love is enabling someone and trying to make their life as comfortable as possible, and
Not at One Heart.
well,
Oh, sorry.
yeah, that's not an indication of the services you provide. But there are a lot of that mentality. I've been around it my whole life.
I see it in our community.
Yeah, I see it in our community,
Yeah.
and you can see like probably how I view things because I've said, well, I love you too much to do that.
Yeah.
And you're like, no, if you loved me, you would do this. Like my kids
Yeah.
would. If you loved me, you'd let me
Yeah.
break
Yeah.
my curfew. No, I love you to give you enough to give you one.
Right.
And that's why I have the rules is because I love you. And however, now he's doing better and he goes up for parole every once in a while.
Okay.
And he's been in a long time, and his repeat offender status is what's hurting him.
Okay.
And it should. Now, I will tell you that he's doing awesome right now, and I think getting older and he's had a daughter he's not being able to really be there for. I think that's been a challenge that I think he would do okay. If he had the right support system still. He knows that this is going to be a battle. I think he knows that the Lord can use his mess and turn it into a message. I said, you could reach people I couldn't. I have a story of what it's impacted around me, but you're someone who's been
In the trenches.
the addict, been that person, but also that's not your identity.
Right.
That's a thing you got to deal with, but you're more than that. And that's what I want him to know, because he is more than that. So, we'll see. And, he kind of wants to come up here, to be honest, if it's ever allowed. And that's kind of his dream.
Okay.
So that keeps him going. Is that what's best? We'll see. But I think he feels like we have family here. And by the way, when I came, and we didn't even talk about by the time I came up here at 11, what happened. That's a big part of it. And that's probably why he wants to come up here, because my mom and dad up here are amazing.
Okay.
They are.
Are they still here?
They're still here, living in the same house that we lived in back then. My dad installed flooring for a living, so he was a carpet layer. My mother at that time stayed home, and they had a son together. So I have another brother,
Okay.
quite a bit younger than me. So even his growing up years, I was almost out of the house or a teenager running around, never home. So it's a little different situation. But I also found out years later I had a long lost sister from my mother who was born a year before I was born, and with my mother, but not but a different father.
Yeah.
Okay.
So my life, my story, man, I got it all over the place.
I learned that same thing, not a sibling, but an aunt.
Yeah.
Like, so I have dad, uncle, aunt, mystery aunt got put up for adoption, and then another aunt. So there's one in the middle there, and I didn't learn about that until I was an adult.
Oh, that's why.
Yeah.
So I've been the oldest child my whole life until I found out I had a sister who was a year older than me.
Dang it.
She's in Texas, and
Have you met her?
yeah, I have several times. We've had Thanksgiving. I don't keep up with my family like I should, especially right now.
Are you a little busy? Does
I'm the
that make it a
worst.
little hard?
Even I've always been busy, but even when I was a mayor, I have a hard time. Like my kids, like I'm desperate to hear from them. Like the other day, I heard from both of them. My son's birthday and my daughter, who's back in town. She's going to be a teacher next year, but my son's in Tennessee. He's been in the Army, but now he's getting out and they bought a house. They're both married. They're awesome. I'm so proud of my kids. But what really made a difference for me, my mama and papa were huge, but when I moved up here, we didn't have much, very working class, but we had family dinner together every night. I had to wash the dishes after dinner every night. Can you believe that, Julie and Charity? They made me watch. Well, they're a little rough around the edges these days, but I don't wash them now. So, and then they saw that I had some natural athletic ability, got me involved in sports. I started making friends because when you move around all the time as a kid, you adapt really easily. It's probably something I probably can do today where I can go in different environments and be okay. Well, that's probably because of the way I grew up. I had to go in different environments all the time. But usually I would not say anything and just
observe.
Kind of be a shy kid.
Yeah.
Well, because you're
It's a
just
defense
not opening up.
mechanism. Yeah.
And once you start to and you're happy, then you're moving again. And you're like,
Yeah. Oh, geez.
Yeah.
I lived in the same house till I went to college. That was my first.
That's why you're
time
normal.
moving away.
Yeah,
You're
we
not a
often
weirdo
talk
like
about
me.
how
Well,
opposite
yeah, we have
our
pretty
upbringings
different.
were. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
my folks here, they gave me the love and family and the TV family I always wanted, we had here. It wasn't perfect. It was not always easy, but they gave me the love, the belonging, the acceptance. I watched them grow too. They suddenly got this preteen kid when they're raising a toddler, a little baby, a toddler. And so their lives, they just completely changed. But, my mom here loved me up. When a girl would break my heart, she'd be there to comfort me. When I wanted to play ball, my dad would be there. He broke his body to provide for our family. They had this thing where I wanted to get an allowance. They just said, okay, well, we get paid if your dad works and lays carpet that week. So you get 1% of whatever money we bring in that week. So I always knew how we're doing.
Oh.
So if it was $1.50, I know you made $150 that week. If it was a $5 a week, that was big time,
Yeah.
So because he had to literally work in order to get the money. There was no, that's just the way it was.
Right.
So I learned so much about work ethic, and, I got a paper route, and I started did that, and I started working at 14, got my first job at Dairy Queen. I helped my dad out laying carpet. Not much of a help. Obviously I didn't choose that career field. My dad's like, you weren't cut out for this. But he'd send me in a closet and just let me hang all my time, like making the closet perfect. And meanwhile, he'd do a whole house. He was awesome. My parents are incredible. And even after my dad stopped laying carpet, he retired from that, was incredibly awesome, had a great reputation. And they ended up doing so many different things. They both went back to school to be EMTs, and they served at Rosebud reservations for about 15 years.
Oh, I did not know that. How cool.
As EMTs, they did that on the weekend. Like, it's full time, but they go like Friday, come back Sunday,
Okay.
work 40 plus hours or whatever.
Sure.
Straight. And they did that for many years, used that also to do mission trips. And then my dad, school bus driver, they work at their church. I don't go to the same church as them, but they work at their church. They have rentals. They've always had multiple things going on, which I think I got that from them.
Yeah.
Because ever since I was in the Air Force, even in the Air Force, I took a part-time job. I just always been that way.
Wow.
So
Great work ethic.
I blame my parents. Well, I don't know if it's a great work ethic, but there's trade-offs. So, but they are incredible, and I would not be who I am without them. There's a lot of healing that took place that they were there for. The hardest, like I said, the hardest part was leaving my brother behind. And when he'd come and visit a couple times, I'd be like, you gotta stay here. Come on. I would always try to beg him. And in his mind, he kind of thinks I left him, because in his mind at the time as a kid, you left, but he doesn't recall what I know is we were supposed to go. And I remember the guilt trip that happened. And, he's a loyal to the bone, and he couldn't leave. And my mom and papa were going to try to get her help, and so it was that's the tough part. So I've kind of seen like that side growing up that was real rough, with just glimpses of love though from my other family members, to up here having a steady family.
Yeah.
And they're incredible. So I've had that way of seeing the difference that makes. Certainly has affected my outlook.
I suppose, yeah.
Yeah. So there you go.
I think we bring it up once in a while on the podcast, but one of the things we're really most proud of here at One Heart is the number of family reunifications that have happened on this campus, because of the stability it provides people, the safety it provides families, and it's just amazing. And even people who are single here and don't have kids will sometimes comment on how great it is when they see, a family be able to be reunited, and pretty powerful kind of stuff. And I have no such stories like you have. I will say this though, fun fact about me: my dad was the mayor of Deadwood for many years when I was growing up.
Actually, yeah.
And it is the reason I never wanted to be mayor. So there you go. Live and learn through other people. That's what I like to do.
So how old were you when you went into the Air Force?
18, right out of high school.
Okay.
So I graduated from Stevens back in 1996, and always knew I wanted to serve in the military. Was one of the things there's a lot of things I wanted to do in life. It probably started early with G.I. Joe and Top Gun and that sort of thing, to be honest with you, as a boy.
That's okay.
And then I found out later on that my grandfather fought in World War II in the Battle of Iwo Jima as a Marine, received a Purple Heart, and just knew that I was supposed to do that. Certainly had doubts whether I could or should. And I'm really, obviously, very grateful I did. It ended up leading me to Colorado Springs, which is where I met and married my wife, and which was great. Obviously, that's the best. But did overseas deployment, worked for U.S. Space Command, worked inside of Cheyenne Mountain in Colorado for a while.
Oh, very cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, everybody's like, "Did you see UFOs in there?"
Yeah.
People always ask that
Is it
kind
real?
of stuff. It's crazy. These structures are on these giant springs, and they're able to withstand all sorts of things. But I spent 12-hour shifts in there. It was kind of wild. When it's just it is just an interesting place, but that's part of the NORAD and Space Command at the time, which is what I was assigned to. And the Air Force Academy was there. I didn't go through the Air Force Academy, but worked at the Air Force Academy at times, and in Peterson Air Force Base in Colorado Springs, major military area.
Right.
So so right away did that as I was figuring things out, and life took a lot of twists and turns, but I planned when my military service was up to move back to Rapid City. I tried so hard to get stationed at Ellsworth, just never happened. But my plan was to come back here, go to Black Hill State, become a teacher and a coach.
Okay.
That was what I wanted to do. Life didn't turn out that way, but that was my plan. And then out of the blue, clear sky, I met my wife. As I swore off dating in my final year of the Air Force,
that's what
don't
happens.
Get attached. I'd already had 2 different 2-year relationships. I'm like, that's like out of the blue, clear sky, and there she was, and I'm like, oh no, I'm in trouble.
Oh no.
I kind of knew it right away. I fought it. I mean, looking back, I'm like, and there's some circumstances there, but she was going to college, about to graduate from Pikes Peak Community College.
Okay.
And she's 5 foot tall. She's still beautiful, but she's just this cute, adorable person. I always say that she's so small. I just say I carry her around in my pocket, my shirt pocket. People think she's my daughter still.
Oh, she does. She has a very young look to her.
Well, now she's trying to look older with glasses and stuff. She's wearing these. She's getting all these like frames now. She's trying to look older. She's one of those who wants to look older than she is, even
Don't
though
do it, Gwen.
Tell her
Just
just
enjoy it.
lean in.
she's like, but I take care of my skin, So she's awesome, and she made me a father, got a son and a daughter, and she mostly stayed home to raise our kids, but she would take school jobs while they were in school. So everything from lunch lady to playground duty, substitute teaching, office work. And then as the kids got older, my son was graduating. She worked at the Hope Center for a couple of years.
I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, she worked there in the mornings. While Reagan, my daughter, was in school, so she always tried to fit all that around. She had gone to college, but really didn't know what she wanted to do. But she knew she wanted to be a mom, that was really important to her. And what's cool now, and I love to brag on her, is as my daughter was graduating, she was deciding what am I going to do? She's very smart. Like Gwenny is a smart cookie, and I was like, whatever you want to do. And then one day she was getting this routine surgery on her wrist to remove a cyst on her wrist. And as she was like getting the anesthesia, her mom and I were next to her. She's like asking the nurse about nursing, and I was like, she's like, I couldn't do that. I'm like, absolutely you could. And when she got through the surgery and she got out, I'm like, you know what you're talking about? You're talking about being a nurse. You're asking questions. I was like, I don't know, honey. She's like, it's too late. No. And then, so she decides, you get your CNA. She goes back to school to get her LPN, served as an LPN for several years, and then decides, I think I can go become a registered nurse. I'll earn that. So while she worked, she was going for her RN. She graduated last December and now is a registered nurse. I'm so stinking proud of her.
Yeah.
And, so we got a son who's a veteran, a daughter just graduated school who's going to be a first-year teacher in the Rapid City School District this year.
Love that.
And my wife, being a big reason why. And so she is just phenomenal. And I love that. I wanted to get stationed so bad at Ellsworth, but if I had, I wouldn't have met her.
Right.
And now this summer, we'll be married 25 years.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I love it.
25 years.
Yeah. And that family, me having that family with my kids and my wife and that stability, like that for me was the dream come true. That's what it's all about. I mean, these job titles and stuff, I believe we're all here for a purpose, but the most important things to me are always going to be my family.
Yeah.
And so that's what I'm most proud of. And yeah, it's the good stuff.
Thanks for tuning in today, Escape Pod listeners. We'll have more with the mayor next week. In the meantime, be sure to download this and other episodes, rate and review wherever you get your podcasts, and share with a friend. Also remember, we are podcasting for a cause, so visit escapepod.live and become a patron today for as little as $2 a month. Support our nonprofit One Heart and help people escape the crisis of poverty and life's other challenges. We appreciate you. See you next week.